You can't defeat me.
No, I know. But he can.
Omniscience. 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 Omniscience.
Okay. It's omniscience. I'm sorry, I won't make the mistake again. Please don't kill me. Hey guys, Mikoshi here. Today we'll be doing the part 2 of our bow build journey. We left at the end of the axe in the first video, and we will then go from there all the way up to tier 10 maps. The build to this point is completely free. There is no need to trade. I did not trade a single item before reaching tier 10 maps. It will speed up the process if you are able to trade, but completely 100% solo self farm viable up until tier 10. After that, it will be a lot harder if you want to not trade whatsoever. But this proves, I think, the capacity of this build to be good at league start. Right after the axe, I actually tested it out. I was able to do a tier 10 immediately after, but it's important to note that I did take a lot of time going through the axe, trying to get my resistance capped, etc., getting the best bow possible, and then getting a 4 link. I was then able to get a 5 link drop right after in a tier 1 map, and I was able to clear the tier 10 map with quite ease. The hardest part was actually killing the boss with the single target damage, but it was still pretty easy, especially with the defense and how our build is set up. Now, this is out the way. Let's get to the things to note. I won't be making a how to make a currency part in this video. If you guys really want to, please let me know in the comments, and if I have a lot of people asking, I might do it after. This build guide is not a game guide, so I won't explain how the game works, but I will go through how the build works. If you're a completely 100% noob to Path of Exile, maybe this video isn't for you for now, but if you've got up all to the end of the acts with the base understanding of this game, you will be able to understand this guide. More guides will be coming out soon if I still receive positive answers from people and a good amount of attention. They may take a bit more time because I'm starting to get busy with my personal life, but I will try to make those videos for you guys if you like it. So sit back, chill, and enjoy. Now, the table of content for this video, I'll be giving a character example at the end of the acts, a basic explanation of build for new players. I also suggest, if you're not a new player, to still watch this part, because I will be giving the basic explanations on how we will make our build, and everything will go on top of that. I will then be giving gear, what you want on defenses, what you want on offense, and then how to go from the acts to mid maps, your atlas tree, and what early crafting methods I do suggest. So first of all, the character example. This is the showcase. I suggest to be at least the act level requirement. I think it's 67, at least 65, please. I mean, if you're a good player, you can always just do it at level 60, right? But if you do follow the story, you should be at level 67 pretty easily, even over leveled actually. I do suggest at least 2 labs done, and then the third one is also worth it. I think it's, even if you might die, it will greatly boost your survivability or your DPS depending on what you decide to go first, but more DPS just means more survivability, and if you live more, well, you'll be able to output more DPS. I suggest, if it's not the case, to go running through desecrated chambers, the canals, or other high level act areas to get the gear needed, because what we want at the end of our acts is to have our capped elemental resistance, or almost capped, okay? It's important to note, if you do this before Kitava, he will give you a minus 30% resistance, because every time you you defeat him, you get minus 30, so that's why, example, our chaos resistance is at minus 60. So if you're capped before Kitava, you might not be capped, and you have to check that over here. If this is at least 105, then after you kill Kitava, you will be still capped. If you have a bit of difficulty capping your resistance with just basic drops, I suggest you use the crafting bench, as this helps, right? You can always add a 10-15% of elemental resistance. For your gems, your main skills are still going to be Rain of Arrow, Trinity, Added Cold, Inspiration, Mirage Archer. Now this is a 5 link. I was quite lucky because I did a corrupt, I went to like a Val portal and it gave me a 5 link. If you do not have a 5 link, you can still do it. I killed Katava before with a 4 link. I only got my 5th link in the early maps. You could drop whatever gems you think is best. I still suggest you keep the Rain of Arrow, Trinity, and Inspiration. Rain of Arrow, obviously, it's our main gem. Trinity deals a huge amount of damage and also gives us elemental penetration. And Inspiration makes our skill cost less, which is a very good quality of life, as we will probably dropping our Clarity Aura. On your bossing and single target, I suggest Siege Ballista, Elemental Focus, added cold elemental damage. Obviously, this could be subject to change. If you don't like elemental focus, you still want to be able to proc ailments, then go for it. Added cold, it can change, right? But just anything that gives pure added damage, and then going for increases once it's enough. For your auras, I suggest you run Grace and Determination once we start going into maps, because we'll be close to the enemies, right? And we still need a minimum of survivability to not die all the time, right? If needed to proc Trinity, use a Herald of your choice to get the 3rd element or 2nd element. You do not need all 3 elements to be able to proc Trinity. I'll be going into more details later. That was a mistake on my part on the first video. For your movement, during mapping, you could go Blink Arrow, Frost Blink combo. Usually most speedrunners will use that because Frost Blink cancels the landing animation of Blink Arrow. But I think the best one for anyone is going to be Flame Dash, as this gives you a basic 3 uses. Which is a very good example for bossing, and you don't need Anomalous Second Wind to be able to do it again. Now your support, I suggest Blood Rage, Mark on Hit, Sniper's Mark. Mark on Hit, Sniper's Mark is good quality of life, and Blood Rage is for Frenzy Generation and more DPS. For your tree, I've given the explanation on the last video. I will have the POB in the description. If you understand, like if you don't need explanations, you don't need to go back to the first video, but if it's a bit more overwhelming, I do suggest you watch the first video. For your flask, I play with two Quicksilvers, 2 lives, and 1 granite flask. It could be subject to change. I think in the beginning, 2 Quicksilver makes it that you run faster, you always have 1 up. 2 lives are good, right? We will have leech, but example, I don't know, you get a big hit, you want to get that life right back up. And then the granite will be able to have more armor and more physical reduction. I suggest you transmute every single one of them. Don't keep them at normal rarity. And only alt them if you have a reduced duration. The rest is okay. We're going to change our flask anyways all the time, so you don't really need to min-max them. Now, let's get to the basic explanation of the build. The basic explanation of the build also has a table of content, so this is a sub-table of content. So our main leveling gem is Rain of Arrows, and our end goal is going to be Tornado Shot. It could also be Lightning Arrow. In the beginning, it levels the same way. And I'm going to start with what the expectations to have for the build, and then the basics to know before. So I'll be saying a bunch of funny words. If you want the definition of them, it's going to be there. And then the offensive explanation, defensive explanation. So first of all, let's go Tornado Shot versus Lightning Arrow and what expectations to have when playing this build. Tornado Shot offers great clear, a very high DPS, and quite good single target damage. Now, it does have good bossing damage. It's still not a bosser, it's still a mapper, but for example, big minions, example essences, and I don't know, the God touched minions, this will greatly help. It's really good, it shreds them basically. It's proven itself throughout the leagues. I've been playing Tornado Shot, it's been a while, people have been playing it for a long time. And I think it hasn't been touched since for 3.22. So the only thing that's going to be different between 3.21 and 3.22 is going to be the Crucible tree, and that makes at lower end budget a 10% decrease DPS, and on the high end maybe 15 to 20%. But that's, I think, the same case for every single build. Finally, it looks pretty goddamn cool, but that's just your opinion, right? Now, Lightning Arrow was quite reliant on Vengeance Cascade to do massive DPS. I think it was like the most played arrow build. Sadly, Vengeance Cascade is getting nerfed. We are getting the support gem instead, but that takes place of another support gem. I think it's also going to have a diminishing DPS, just like Graded Multiple Projectiles. But it has a very good clear speed. You have the ability to shotgun. Bossing is a bit hard though, especially in the beginning, but once you have enough DPS, you will be shredding them, but in the beginning, bossing is definitely not it. Now, if the boss is near other white mobs, right, you have the ability to shotgun, which will shred his HP. But if it's just single target, it's kind of losing a lot. So with the nerf in 3.22, it will be losing around 50 to 60% of its power. You might say, yeah, but if I'm able to do 90% of the HP in one shot and the returning only did 10%, then I'd only be losing 10% power, right? But this is just a number. And then it's also going to be, has to be seen and verified during 3.22 as we have tattoos and stuff coming and we have no clue how it's going to work out. That also looks pretty goddamn cool. So I would suggest going Tornado Shot for 3.22. But after that, you can always go Lightning Arrow and it won't change anything in this guide. Now, basics to know. The meaning of the funny words I'm going to be saying. If you are a longtime player of Path of Exile, whether you've played bow builds or not, you could completely skip this part. I'll be going over what is, armor, evasion, trinity, stuff like that. It's just going to be the basic words and the understanding. So I'll be explaining what is a mapper, what's a bosser, what is chain, what is pierce, what does shotgun mean, what evasion, armor, spell suppression, what is triple elemental damage versus the cold conversion damage, and what is critical strike chance and multiplier. So if you understand all these concepts, just skip it. There will be no very good information for you guys. What is mapper against bossers? So mappers usually are going to run through maps, destroying large packs of monster very quickly and efficiently. It's a very fast, usually has a lower defense cap, a build with a higher DPS. That doesn't mean it's necessarily glass cannon, okay? It could still be tanky, but it will often go more for higher DPS on a larger area. Bosses are usually meant to kill a single target or a lower number of very strong numbers, usually uber bosses. It is usually slower and not meant for clear speed, so it is very good on a single target damage, but when we're talking about areas, it goes really down. Usually it's going to be a bit tanky, or it's going to be very glass cannon, such as Ice Trap builds, where they have 200 HP, but they insta-kill our friend here, Exarch. Obviously, we will be a mapper, but we will be very defensive and very high DPS. I think in the beginning of the maps, it is better to be well-rounded, and then after that, you can make the decision of the direction you want your build to go. Now, chain, pierce, and shotgunning, what do they mean? Pierce just basically means you're able to pierce enemies with your arrows. Usually, when you're going to shoot the arrow, it's going to hit the first enemy and it's going to stop there. Now, if you're able to pierce two enemies, it will deal damage to one enemy, deal damage to a second enemy, so it pierces two enemies, and then stops at the third, right? So it doesn't go all the way. What does chain mean? It basically chains onto other enemies as long as they're into a range, right? There's a limited range to chain. So I shoot the enemy, it doesn't pierce him, right? It chains to the other enemy. Now, what's important to note is it cannot be procced if it pierces the enemy. So if you have pierce, it won't chain, it'll pierce through. And once you have finished your piercing range, then it could be able to chain. So for example, if this was the second enemy, then it would chain onto it. Shotgunning. Shotgunning is usually with a single attack, you'll be able to deal multiple damage to a single person. So now the basic example, lightning arrow or tornado shot, it will have the shotgunning ability. You shoot a single enemy, and once it shoots, with lightning arrow, it does 3 other enemies, and with tornado shot, it does 3 secondary projectiles. It will heal damage to him, him, and him. Now, if you have multiple projectiles, so example 3, you'll shoot this enemy, this enemy, this enemy. Now, this enemy will take damage from the first and from the second. The enemy in the middle will take damage from the first arrow, and then the explosions, or the shotgunning from other enemies. So the moment they start getting at least 2 attacks on a single enemy, we can consider it shotgunning. And you see here, the enemy in the middle will get shotgun 3 times. Is getting shotgun twice. Basically, he has 3 times the amount of damage on his face compared to a single arrow. Alright, so basics to know. Evasion. What is evasion? Evasion is going to be your first layer of defense, and that increases a character's chance to evade incoming attacks. Evasion is opposed by attacker's accuracy. So sometimes when you attack minions and you have the impression your arrows aren't touching him, he's basically evading your attack. If you have a 50% chance to evade, that means you only get hit 50% of the time. And usually it will be used by lower defense characters such as ranger builds. Let's say you get a hit, it's going to be 95% of your HP going down. Well, if you have usually you're going to go for more evasion. as you don't have like armor and stuff to mitigate damage. You just want to completely be immune to that damage. Armor is a form of defense that mitigates incoming physical damage from hits. Usually it's going to be used by tankier builds. We will be using it because thanks to the radio ascendancy, having armor is going to be quite easy, especially if we add a granite flask to it. Spell suppression. Spell suppression is a layer of defense that gives chance to reduce damage from spells. The chance to reduce the damage is random roll per spell hit, okay? Now, the default amount of damage suppressed is 50%, which means if we have a 100% spell suppression, we only take half the damage from spells. So the moment you suppress the spell, you have 50% of it getting mitigated as a base. Triple Elemental against physical to cold. Triple Elemental builds deal fire, lightning, and cold damage. So they deal all 3 elemental damage types. And they mainly use the Trinity support gem, which offers a great DPS boost as well as elemental penetration. Physical to cold conversion builds are builds that scale the most amount of physical damage multiplier and additives to then convert it to cold, who also gets multiplied, having 2 layers of DPS multiplications. They are usually more expensive builds and require specific items or mods, but will scale much more than with currency and with power. And their ceiling is usually going to be very high compared to triple elemental builds, especially for Tornado Shot. It is not even a question. Physical to cold conversion goes way higher than the triple elemental damage. Critical strike chance and multiplier. Critical strike chance is the probability of you dealing a critical strike, and what a critical strike is, it's an attack that deals more damage than a normal one, and the amount of damage that the critical strike deals is based on your critical strike multiplier, which multiplies the base damage of the attack when a critical strike is dealt. For example, my normal attack does 100 damage, I hit the enemy, I deal 100 damage. Now if I do a critical attack with no multiplier, I will be doing 100 damage, no multi, 100 damage. Now if I add a plus 50 multiplier, it's going to be 100 damage plus 50, it's going to be 150. Now if I have a 100% crit chance, and I have a plus 500 crit multi, I will be doing 600 damage every time I shoot the enemy instead of 100. Critical strike chance is very good, but because early on in game critical strike chance is very hard to scale, we will not be doing any crit chance before a long time, and I will be explaining how to turn that into our advantage. Now, Tornado Shot, I'm going to be explaining how Tornado Shot works. It's the main skill of the main skill gem of our build. It has a very high DPS and a very good clear. What's important to note is that the tornado itself does not deal damage. Only the primary projectile as well as the 3 secondary projectiles deal damage. So you will shoot a single arrow, it will become a tornado, and then shoot 3 additional secondary projectiles. What's really good is because extra arrows, will scale extremely well with this, because if I have a single shot, I will be doing 1 primary projectile and 3 secondary. If I add 4 arrows, I will be doing 5 primary, so basically 5 tornadoes, and then 5 times 3. So we will have 15 arrows as secondary projectiles only, and then if you add the primary one, we will be 20. So instead of doing 4 arrows, if we add 4 arrows, our basic attack will do 4 arrows, If you add a plus 4 arrow, it will go up to 20. The 15 is secondary projectiles, by the way. So it will go from whatever this sad looking thing is all the way up to this monstrosity. So this guide will go on the Trinity, so elemental DPS, but it's important to understand that physical to cold is the higher ceiling and higher DPS, basically a better build. As you can see, the numbers are way bigger here than here, but it is more expensive. So for this guide and for the next ones to come, we will only concentrate on the Trinity ones, and then for higher budget ones, I will be making videos for the physical to cold conversion. Now, table of content, we are still in the basic explanation of the build. I will be going on the offensive explanation and then defensive ones. For the offense, we will be talking about how does Trinity work, how does Sniper's Mark work, how Blood Rage and Frenzy Generation, Elemental Penetration and Inversions, and then the important tree nodes for the offensive things. First of all, Trinity is going to be the main support gem, okay? It gives us up to 16% elemental penetration. It is massive. and it also gives up to, I think, 30% more elemental damage. So it is basically a increased elemental damage gem with extra elemental penetration, and it's also a elemental focus gem, but we also have the advantage of elemental penetration as well as being still able to deal ailments on the mobs. Now, it is important then to be able to deal all 3 types of elemental damage, but you can also proc Trinity with only 2 types of elemental damage. I made a mistake in my first video where I thought it was all 3, but no, it's my mistake. You can do it with all 2, but still suggested you're able to deal all 3. So now, what does Trinity do? It gives you resonance, okay? Per element, you have a maximum of 25 resonance. You have for lightning, cold, and fire. How to gain resonance is if you deal the most amount of damage with cold, you will gain 25 resonance for the 2 other elements for 2 seconds. So if I deal the highest amount of damage with cold, I will get 25 lightning and 25 fire resonance. On my second attack, if I deal the most lightning damage, I will gain fire and cold resonance. For every 25 resonance, we are able to penetrate 16% elemental resistance, and for every 5 lowest resonance, we're able to deal 3% more elemental damage. So we will always be able to at least have 50, which means at least 30% more elemental damage at all times with a 16% elemental resistance at all times. Now, Sniper's Mark, what is that? The mark are a type of spell skill, okay? They're a subset of a curse, and they share the same curse cap with hexes, which means we'll only be able to deal a single curse, and we will use Sniper's Mark. Sniper Mark makes that cursed enemies take 16 to 35% increased damage from projectile hits, so it is basically a free 35% more DPS. Blood Rage and Frenzy Charge Generation. Blood Rage gives you attack speed, which is an increase to DPS, and it also gives 1.2% attack physical damage leech as life. We deal more elemental damage, but if you still do a bit of physical damage, it's just extra leech for free. But also what's really good is because it gives a 25% chance to gain a Frenzy Charge on kill. We have a maximum of 3 Frenzy Charges if you do not add your cap, and each of them give a 4% increased attack speed as well as a 4% more damage. So if you have all 3 up, you have 12% more attack speed and 12% more damage. And with Blood Rage up and running, if it's level 20, you basically have a 30% more damage boost. Now, Elemental Penetration and Inversion. This build will not be using Omniscience yet, but the reason most high-end builds go Omni is because we're able to penetrate a lot of elemental resistance. To give you an example of what Elemental Penetration does is, for example, I deal 100 damage and I have a 0% Elemental Penetration, and I hit a monster with a 0% resistance, I will be dealing 100 damage. If you go 100 damage with 0 pen, but now the monster has a 50% elemental resistance, I will only be doing 50% damage. So only 50 damage per hit. Now, take the same example and you deal 100 damage with 0 pen, but the monster has a minus 50% elemental resistance, I will be doing 150 damage, basically gaining 50% extra damage. Now, if the monster has a 50% elemental resistance and I have a 50% elemental penetration, so I'm able to penetrate, and is not a elemental penetration, but penetrating 50%, we will be able to mitigate that and having 100 damage. So compared to 0 and 50 elemental penetration, we are doubling our DPS. Now, if we're having 100% elemental penetration, we are tripling our DPS. There is a node in our tree that has a 25% chance to treat our enemy's resistance as inverted, which means once every 4 hits, the 50% elemental resistance of that enemy will go to minus 50. So we will be doing 50, 50, 50, and the 4th time we will be doing 150, which means depending on the enemy's elemental resistance, we would basically be having 25% increased DPS. Now, the important tree nodes, I've explained them in part 1, but in case you skipped it, we will be using Precise Technique, Point Blank, Accuracy Masteries, and Bow Masteries. As long as our accuracy rating is higher than our HP, we have a 40% more DPS. Okay, right here, thanks to Precise Technique. Usually, our HP will be lower than our accuracy, especially with the nodes that we're going to get on our tree, but if you still need help, I suggest you get Precision. Also, Point Blank gives a 30% more damage when the targets are right next to it. So if you're into their face, you basically have a 30% more DPS. and if you add both of it together, you have a 70% increased total DPS at all times. Now, the bow mastery, which also increases, the increases and reductions to projectile speed also apply to damage with bows. This will give a stupid amount of DPS, especially early on, and you should have all these nodes by the level 30. So once you start your axe, you will already have them. If you want tree progression, you can always look at the POB down in the description below, and it will give you a step-by-step for every 10 level what to get. Now finally, the last thing on the basic explanation of the build is going to be the defensive explanation. First of all, evasion. Now that I've explained what evasion and stuff are, it's going to be our first layer of defense, and by the end of the axe, we will have around 50% of our evasion, and our goal will be to go cap it. If I remember correctly, our evasion cap is going to be 95. We're going to try and reach the 90s, and we can use a flask to get more evasion to climb those numbers, but it will naturally go up with dexterity, which gives inherent bonuses to evasion, as well as better gear. Our armor, we will be in front of enemies' faces with point blank's keystone to get more DPS, so we will get hit often, and armor will help us not die if hits are not evaded. So if it passes through our first layer of defense, we have a second one. With the use of determination and our granite flask, we will easily achieve a 50% physical reduction. Finally, spell suppression. We will be in front of enemies' faces with point blank keystone, again, as I said, so we will get hit by the attacks as well as by spells. So we can easily get around 70 to 80% thanks to our ascendancy, which gives us a 40% chance to suppress spell damage already, and we will try to get it capped at 100%, which is easily achievable by level 75 thanks to our tree. The important notes for that: Quartz Infusion will give us our 40% spell suppression as well as phasing, which means we're able to walk through packs. So you won't get blocked if there's a bunch of mobs near you. You can just run through them, which will help your survivability. And spell suppression chance is huge. Also, getting the Graceful Assault as well as the 2 little passives right before it will give a total of a 60% increased armor and a 50% increased evasion while we're affected by Onslaught. And because we have our Radio Ascendancy, we always have Onslaught on. So basically 50% more evasion, 60% more armor thanks to Graceful Assault. Alright, so we finished with the basic explanation of the build. Let's get up to the gear. First of all, the offense. I did not use item as examples, as I think often examples can bring people to the wrong directions. Okay, for your bow, the best obviously will be a triple elemental bow. Now, it might probably won't drop, right? So if you're able to get a double one and then add a craft, or get a single high elemental, so example an added cold, and then you can craft an added lightning or an added fire on top of that, and you will be able to proc all 3 elements. If possible, make your quiver only offensive. All right, you only want offensive mods on your quiver. Quivers, especially early on, are the highest DPS multipliers you can get, sometimes even more than your bow. Now, obviously, if without the quiver you're not able to cap your elemental resistance, then do search for elemental resistance on your quiver, but try to cap your elemental resistance without your quiver. Defenses, the most important thing is to cap your elemental resistance, okay? Your evasion, your armor, your spell suppression will go only secondary. You need to cap your elemental resistance. Now, by the end of the axe, you might not be capped, so I suggest you run through tier 1 maps carefully. You will be dying if you're not careful, if they're not capped. Once your elemental resistance are capped, you will literally run through maps without dying. Now, do not sacrifice your sockets and your links to get more elemental resistance, because if you deal no damage, well, there's no purpose of being tanky, but still manage your sockets and your elemental resistance. Attribute requirements should be your last priority. Most of the time what's going to happen is you're going to need intelligence, for example, Trinity and like Heralds of Thunder and stuff like that. If you get a better gear, but you do not meet the requirements, still keep the gear. I suggest you just get a lower level gem. The requirements are lower. Now, general tips to go from the acts to mid maps. With only the gear I got from the acts and a few tier 1 maps, I did a clear tier 10. So with no, I did not alch them and I did not alt them, but I did a clean tier 10 map and I was able to kill the boss, and it was, I wouldn't say a walk in the park, but it was very, very easy. There was no real skill things. It was pretty easy. When there was large packs of or big monsters, I would drop my ballistas and it will make the fight trivial, okay? The only problem I kind of had was the boss, but even then, with our evasion, our spell suppression, and our armor, you won't be dying. It's very, very strong. When you're doing maps, do the strong boxes and the Val, you know, the Val portals. Val portals can drop stupidly strong items. I got a 5 links thanks to that, so do not skip Val, okay? And then killing the map boss will usually give you more maps, and then that's how you know you start going your Alice progression. Also, general tips, I suggest you buy maps from Kirax. You buy the ones that you have incomplete, and once you've bought all the maps from Kirak that you wanted, you do a single one of his mission and it will reset his shop. Once you start having a couple of Atlas Tree passives, map sustain will become very, very easy. For your Atlas Tree, my suggestion, depending on playstyle, if you're going completely solo self-found, or like you don't want to trade whatsoever, I don't know, you have no tabs and stuff, you don't want to start farming, I suggest you go Expedition, as Expedition is a king because it offers good crafting early on, things you cannot have with currency. Because you're limited with your currency, ROG will be able to make you items that you're able to get with currency without using your currency, basically, which is very, very good. I also suggest going for the syndicates. That will give you the syndicate crafting recipes. What's good about that is, example, you have a veiled item that jumps that has good mods. You have 3 mods that you can choose of, and you'll be able to make items that are strong. It will also give you access to crafting recipes. I'll be going into more detail basically a bit later. Going for essences is also a good thing for crafting, as you're able to do specific mod crafting as well as good early currency making. And then for general, you can go for the small passive Atlas Tree, and that is very, very good for map sustain. If you do the wandering path, you will never have a problem for map sustaining. Now, if you do have problems with DPS, I suggest you try out the, I think it's a Nico tree, where you gain buffs with all the mines that you have in the map, and also getting the shrine nods that will just basically give you big buffs for 50 seconds. For your early crafting, ROG is really king, okay? Farming Expedition will give you specific expedition currency, which you can use to, not to trade, to deal with ROG. This is ROG. And you will be able to craft items thanks to that. And they give you way more options than currency, especially as we have low pools of them in the beginning. For example, here, I have boots, it gives me armor, energy shield, a very low tier of life, and maximum mana. It's a very bad item, but here, for only 13 of whatever this is, you're able to reroll it 6 times, keeping the best outcome. I was able to make this belt, which gives me a 60 maximum life, a 30 resistance, 25 resistance. This, I think I crafted it a bit later, and I kept this belt for a long time before swapping. So you're able to make quite good items thanks to him. Obviously, once you reach mid to end tier late game, you know, like, he kind of loses his value, but especially in the beginning, he's able to help you a lot. June gives you access to veiled crafting recipes that can prove to be very useful if you want to add them to your build, as well as selling them, or when you find items on the floor, you'll have a choice of 3 veiled mods, which could be useful, example, elemental resistance and stuff like that. I think she's also the one that gives you the double elemental resistance, for example, lightning and cold resistance, fire and lightning resistance, stuff like that. If I remember correctly, she's the one that gives you that. The crafting recipes, elemental resistance crafting recipes, attribute recipes, and flat elemental damage recipes are most of the time going to be the most important ones, especially in the beginning. I have a link here that gives you all the crafting recipes and their locations, so just do check out. Finally, essences are the best way to target crafting. So example, you want lightning resistance and you do not care about anything else, essences is the way to go. You smack an essence onto it and it's going to guarantee the mod that you want, and it's very good. It's also a very good way to make early currency in the game, and then you'll be able to trade those little chaos that you make to be able to, I don't know, get cheap uniques, or, you know, cheap amulets or things to be able to, like, kind of make your build up to date. Alright guys, so that's about it. Hopefully you did like this video and you've learned a few things. I kind of rushed this video to be able to make it before 3.22 drops. So if I go a bit fast or if I miss a few things, I'm really sorry about that, and I will catch up on the other video. If you have any comments, constructive criticism, or you know, anything you want to add, please let me know down in the comments. If you have any difficulty throughout the playthrough while you're following this build, Please let me know your difficulty. I will try and help you. I'll be able to make more in-depth videos on problems that new players and low-level players are facing. So I'll be, be able to make better builds basically. So hopefully you enjoy and have a nice one. And the next video should be out in less than a week. I will try to make it as fast as possible. Sorry. So peace, enjoy.